Welcome to the 10-Minute Treasure. My name's Jeff Pospisil, and in this video, I want to talk mainly to you United Methodist lay people, because I want to make sure that you are aware that there is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to decide whether or not your church remains in the United Methodist denomination or whether they want to choose to become independent or join a new denomination or a different denomination. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And it's different than, I know you can just individually leave your church. I know you can just walk out and join the Lutheran church or join the Baptist church or whatever. But I know your church is your family. And a lot of you don't want to walk out on that family. And if your whole family feels like leaving, or the vast majority of your family feels like leaving, why shouldn't you be able to leave? Well, part of the reason you've never been able to leave in the past is the United Methodists have a trust clause, meaning that the denomination owns your property. They own every dollar that goes in the offering plate. They own the offering plates. They own the building. Even if they didn't put any money towards it, they own it. That's part of the deal with the United Methodist denomination. But beginning in 2019, an opportunity opened for churches to what we call disaffiliate, or leave the United Methodist denomination. And that's the opportunity I want to talk to you about. And I want you to know that it expires at the end of this year, 2023. So if this opportunity has been around since 2019, why are churches only now becoming aware of it? Well, part of the reason is the denomination really didn't want churches to leave. We wanted General Conference to be able to approve a plan that would make this a nice, orderly, and neat process. I used to be the conference treasurer for the Dakotas UMC, so I kind of know what I'm talking about here. We really put a lot of faith in General Conference, but then the approval plan to approve the split was going to come before this General Conference in 2020, but then the pandemic happened. And so it was delayed until 2021. And then it was delayed again until 2022. And then it was delayed again until 2024. And at that time, the leaders of what will become the Global Methodist, what did become the Global Methodist denomination, kind of saw the writing on the wall that the denomination was just going to keep kicking the can down the road. And this may never be settled by the General Conference. So they decided to go ahead and launch what became the Global Methodist denomination on May of 2022. And churches were hesitant to lead. And again, I said conferences didn't really want churches to leave, mostly because there wasn't a place for these churches to land. And now there is starting to be a place for the churches to land. This screen capture comes from the United Methodist Denomination's news site. By the way, I'm going to put a lot of links in the description, so a good place to fact check and verify anything that I put out. But this is the number of churches that have disaffiliated in the U.S. so far. And you see that big rush in 2022, as now there's over 2,000 churches of the, I think it's roughly 30,000 churches in the U.S. have left. And we expect another wave this year in 2023. And there's also going to be churches around the globe that'll also be joining the Global Methodist denomination. So it is a growing denomination. There is now a place to land that actually has churches. Those that in 2022, they were landing in a denomination without churches. And now there is a denomination with churches, with staff, and pastors and all that kind of stuff to land. And I said the deadline was the end of this year. So that would be December 31st of 2023. And you may have heard somebody say, well, we can extend that. You know, we can extend that. Well, I can read the book of discipline. And here is that paragraph that is governing this. And if you look at the bottom, this part that I'm highlighting, there's not a lot of wiggle room. It says that this shall not be used after December 31st of 2023. There's not a lot of wiggle room. So even if a district superintendent says we're going to do it, they're going to get challenged, and chances are they're not going to be able to really extend it. What authority do they have to extend these terms? So I don't believe they are going to be able to extend it. So then that leaves the question, well, what about um, the General Conference in 2024? The big legislation that was set to be voted on in 2020 was what we called the protocol. And this protocol was supposed to be um, a fair way of splitting the denomination. And it was agreed upon by centrists and liberals and progressives and people in the US and outside the US. And a lot of people signed off on it. A lot of good press. Well, this article, it's by the Episcopalians, by the way, so it's a neutral news source, talks about how this is not going to happen. The support from the centrists and the liberal side has they no longer support this. And as far as I know, they haven't changed their mind on this. If somebody can correct me on that, I haven't seen any public notice that they've changed their mind to support the protocol, and I haven't seen an alternative either. So those are two things. If somebody could point to you to an alternative that has broad support, or that the protocol is now being supported by those like Bishop Bickerton that have since denounced it, that would be that would prove me wrong, but I don't see that. I know that there's a lot of churches that are in the discernment stage. They're trying to decide, you know, are we serious about leaving, or are we content or committed to staying? And that's fine. And so you might be thinking, well, when do we need to make that decision? Well, if the due date is December 31st, 2023, and at least in the Dakotas, it took a good 2 to 3 months to actually go through the process to be able to leave. Well, does that put you at the end of September, early October? Well, not exactly, because the very last step in the process is that the conference needs to approve your church to leave. And I have a screenshot here that from the Dakotas. They in November they had a special conference session. So a special session of the annual conference where the only business was to approve the churches that were leaving. So you need to look at your conference calendar and maybe check out the conference website and look to see, has there been a special called session? Did the bishop announce it? Check the calendar and look. The Dakotas UMC one is pretty blank in November, and it's absolutely blank. And if you look in October and December, it's still blank. There's no called session of the annual conference there. Maybe that'll change, but until I see it in writing, I'm going to assume that my last opportunity is June of 2023, when your regular session of the annual conference is. And so what does that mean? That means February is the due date for a church in the discernment process. If they don't decide by December 28th whether or not they want to leave or go, guess what? They're United Methodist for probably indefinitely. Probably indefinitely. It's very difficult otherwise to leave the denomination. So, and what does it mean to start? It means that your church board, whatever the leadership of it, it could be the administrative council, the leadership team, I know they have different names, but they need to vote to pursue disaffiliation. And then they send a letter of notification onto their district superintendent. And the district superintendent then walks the church through that. And the district superintendents have been great about this. This does not commit your church to leaving. This does not even commit your church to having a church-wide vote, but at least starts the process where you're saying we are really strongly leaning towards leaving the denomination. We want to have that door open so that way if we're ready as a church family to leave, then we can go ahead and do that. One of the best places to find good information is to talk to those that have been through the process. And I have here, this is a list of churches that have started the process, and the ones that are bold have gone all the way to completing it. So these are the 18 churches from the Dakotas UMC that have completed the process. If you know people from those churches, talk to them. If you know their pastors, talk to them, reach out. They want to talk you through it, and they'll tell you about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that's good. I'm estimating that close to 75 to 100 churches from the Dakotas are likely to start the process, and most of them will probably see it through to the end. In Minnesota, the number is probably closer to 20 to 30 churches are likely to go through the process, and we'll see how that all plays out. But at least it gives you a place to go for information that's really you could trust, because it's probably people you know at Stickney or Fargo or Williston or wherever. The last thing I want to leave you with is, if your church is leaning towards leaving the United Methodist denomination, where are you going to land? And some of you might be thinking maybe it's a good idea to be independent, be free from all this denominational stuff. And I know that sounds attractive, but first of all, I don't think it's biblical. When I read through Acts, when I read through the epistles, I believe Paul and Peter and Apollos and others were basically the predecessors of the denominations, in that, not that Paul was Lutheran or anything like that, but Paul provided accountability. He was responsible for certain churches. He equipped churches with teaching and with personnel. He sent people to different churches. And that sounds a lot like a denomination. I don't see any church acting completely independent in the Bible. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I see it. So where are you going to land? And a lot of churches are landing in the Global Methodist denomination. That's been the primary spot where they've been landing. And there are some that are waiting, and that's not a bad option, to wait and see, are the Global Methodist denomination just UMC 2.0? Well, you can wait and see, and that's probably fine. But at least now there's starting to be churches in that denomination that you can judge, and you can reach out to them. Other places, you can go to their websites. I'm going to put their website addresses up there, globalmethodist.org. We in the Dakotas, Minnesota area, we have our own website, but probably the best place for you to go, because you can make yourself appear any way you want on your own website. But when you go on Facebook, people don't always put their best face forward. So that's a good place to see how people are really like that are becoming Global Methodist. And so I'm going to point you, if you're in the Dakotas and Minnesota and you are sympathetic, that doesn't mean you have to become Global Methodist, but you're sympathetic. There's a Dakotas, Minnesota GMC, and you have to be approved to be a member of that. So if I look through your Facebook profile and I see a bunch of stuff about, oh, the conservatives are bad, blah, 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 you're not going to be approved. So it's tough. But this is a good way to see what the people are really like, what they're really talking about, how they're encouraging each other. The other one is, and this is a much larger group, it's about 60,000, is the Friends of the Global Methodist Church. And that's a great one. Both these groups, too, are really good for resourcing you. So if you decide to start the process, they're going to be able to help you out. There's a lot of individuals that really care for our churches, and they just want to help them however they can. So if you're leaning towards leaving, I encourage you to explore the Global Methodist denomination. My regular video, this felt almost more like an infomercial in some ways, but I really have a heart for our Methodist churches. And I believe still what I said almost a year ago. I put out a video that every church and every pastor needs a good home. And that's a principle I believe in, that if your church belongs in the United Methodist denomination, I think that's awesome. Commit to that, recommit to that. If your church belongs in the Global Methodist denomination, have courage. Go ahead and take those steps. You know, I'm just really for our Methodist churches being successful. All right. Till next time, God bless you.